Do you have an extra water? Somebody has an extra water.
So I'm double fisted. Ty, do you want a water that I literally have only broken the seal on the cap, didn't even take it off? Pass that down there, I'm sorry.
He's anxious. He wants to go home and watch the ball game.
I've got it right here.
Oh.
We use the mayor's.
What are we doing?
Well, we can't give it on.
If you guys have a Skype account, you can log into. You can log in on this. If you know the username and password for Skype.
They say you did it on purpose.
I don't use Skype.
Huh?
Here, I've got a iPad.
You got Skype on there?
You know what, honestly, I've never,
Nope.
If he has an iPhone, he can FaceTime you on the iPad. I don't know if Jim has an iPhone.
Well, just call him and tell him we can't get it.
he can FaceTime on here.
Yeah, and that'll work the same.
Let's see. I'm laying on myself in the video, but at least I can engage in conversation.
Going with the kitty.
You're done eating candy.
We do have 6:30, so I want to let those people at home knowing Jim wants to join us via computer, so we're trying to see if we can make that happen here. We're trying to get that set up,
Packets here.
and we'll get started here in just a second.
Possibly. I think we all got it.
What's my Apple ID? Hold on. So I do apologize to those at home waiting for us to start. We do know that it
Okay,
is
he's
time.
got an iPhone.
Yeah, I don't.
Okay. I think Jackie's got an iPhone too.
How do I find out what my Apple ID is on my phone here?
Go to settings.
Settings.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That sounds like the code from a luggage.
And it's on here.
That guy will help you.
Sorry.
So like if I do
Passwords and accounts, is that?
settings and then
She's got an iPhone, so she'll.
Aha. Here, I'm getting it on this one. Thank you, Andrew.
What do you got behind her?
I think I can. Well, let's just not zoom in so everybody has this. I think I can trust you, but. Yes, I know it's
I have to add them
This one, everything's been sent to-
Okay.
I think in mine's signing in here too.
Kids.
All right, let's go ahead and get started. This city codes is the first thing that's on our agenda for this evening. I know we want to talk about codes specifically for our golf carts and for sidewalks and for signs and for backflows. So we'll go ahead and bring up our police chief if we can talk about golf carts first. Sure, we're not using this.
Andrew, you want to come up?
Stick them in the candy basket. Stick them in the candy basket. Chan.
Just have a seat and jam chair of that.
Yeah, we can
Hold on,
cover
working
it up.
outside.
Jack, you have one? It is kind of funny.
She's working on it.
Okay, you want to tell us about?
So, I'm here to hopefully just talk about golf carts. I'm sure we'll hear a little more on the topic.
Yeah.
Short-term goals, I guess, would be to talk about being able to use it in the neighborhood as a tool to operate in the neighborhood, sell the neighborhood. Long-term goal being more to see if we could talk about adopting similar rules and regulations to some surrounding communities that do allow golf carts out on the road. So, really, like I said, my hope would be I operate here, obviously in Central Park, using it to take people around and show people the neighborhood, as well as use it to maintain the neighborhood. And then from there, I'd be open to hearing conversations on what it would look like, if at all possible, to maybe bring in some new rules and regulations on allowing them throughout the community.
So right now, your request basically is just for you as a realtor to drive people around?
I mean, that's where we can start the conversation.
Okay.
My ultimate hope, though, would be to get it to where it's a community thing, not just specific to me as a realtor. So really, you know, I've been a part of some communities that offer or allow golf carts to go around. I think it allows for some pretty heavy social interaction between neighbors. I think it connects neighbors on a different level. I think it's a fun way for community involvement, experience community functions. If we start talking about things like farmers market and a little city center and doing some different events at the city center, to me it's another progressive, active way for community involvement. So really I'd like to talk about more than just me specifically and more community as a whole.
We've got lots of information here in our packet on it, and our police chief here is to the questions about that. I got to be honest with you, my first thought was we're not a retirement community, and that's automatically what I think of. I think about visiting, my wife's grandmother when she lived in a retirement community, mobile home park in Tucson, Arizona, where everybody drove.
Yeah.
Golf carts. I do have some reservation with us having, if it's not able to be licensed, can we have them on a city street? So I'm glad our police chief is here. I think it's certainly a conversation we should have
Absolutely.
to see what the rest of the council thinks, or do we want to hear from our police chief first? Let's hear from
See
our
what the
police
chief has to say.
Okay.
Okay. So you have this in your packets. So if you'll take that out, we'll just take a look and see what we're talking about.
Because that's not in the
So this is not in your packet, but I'm going to hold it up for you. Okay.
It's on the screen.
Yeah.
Okay,
There you
so
go.
look on the screen.
So if you look up on the screen, the thing on the right is a golf cart. The thing on the left is like a low-speed vehicle. They have different classifications for the vehicles, and then once you get beyond that, then you have other types of modes of transportation, and that would be the small utility vehicles like a
John Deere Gator.
John Deere Gator. Okay, it has a box on the end. Then it fulfills some other requirements within the statutes on classification. The blue one up on the top left is an ATV, and then you've got the UTVs, the utility task vehicles, upper right, and the ones on the bottom are the high-speed sports vehicles. And just today, I had somebody come in wanting the one on the bottom right they wanted to drive it on our streets, and argued about it, about their ability to do that. And I told them that since we don't even have golf carts allowed at this point, that would certainly not be allowed. So, and that has come up twice. That type of vehicle, kind of a combination between the top right and the bottom right, has come up in the last couple of years. And in the 5 years I've been here, we've been asked about golf carts twice. So, just a little on that. Of course, being the police chief, I have concerns about safety and what that would bring to our community and how it would change the dynamic of our traffic that is now only suited for automobiles, and in a lot of places in our community not even for pedestrian traffic. And I would point to the blinking lights on Woodlawn to warn people that people are on the shoulders and maybe crossing. So to introduce something new would be a concern of mine. And this document from the AARP, it's from their Policy Institute, answered a lot of the questions that I had, because I had to do some research when the question came up. And on page 5, and you don't have that? Okay.
We can give them the backup.
Here we go. Thank you. That's on page 5. This whole document is full of good information, and it shows it on one side and the other. It's good for some communities. It is good for short trips. It's good for saving gas. It's good for saving electricity. A lot of things such as that. But again, our concern is for safety and the safety of our citizens and those passing through our community. And so over on the right-hand column, the mixing of low-speed vehicles or golf carts on roads with higher-speed vehicles can be dangerous for all users of the roadway, including automobile drivers. So, that is one of our concerns, is that we have that new mix of vehicles, not like bicycles that have been here forever, on our roadways, and even on our new 3-lane road and our new development on Woodlawn, we've accommodated for the bicycles by creating a space for them to be away from traffic. Okay, the traffic lanes, the bicycle lanes.
But today bicycles are allowed on the roads without those, right?
Right. Yeah, they're legal by statute. Okay. In this document, there's a gentleman here at the bottom of the first page, and that is the General Counsel, the Trade Association's General Counsel for golf carts. And on page 3, he said his industry agrees that golf carts shouldn't be allowed to mix with traffic on roads with speed limits that exceed 25 miles per hour. And he said golf cart operators driving on public roads should be required to have at least a driver's license or be at least 16 years old and have completed driver's education. You shouldn't allow people who can't qualify for a driver's license, whether because of age or sight, to operate them. It's too dangerous, he said. So there are concerns about introducing this new thing into our community. On page 24 of that larger document, that research document, it's consider carefully the safety implications of introducing golf carts and low-speed vehicles onto existing bicycle and pedestrian paths. So we're building Woodlawn, and we've got a place set aside for bicycles and pedestrians. So part way through that paragraph on the lower left, it says, introducing golf carts into paths that have traditionally been used only by walkers and cyclists has the potential for serious negative consequences, especially for older pedestrians and cyclists who tend to move less quickly and who may have slower reaction times than younger people. There are things like that I want us to take into consideration, because we don't want to have bad situations take place. Now, there are many, many more things that I've highlighted in this report, and I'm not going to bore you with them. I found this report to have a lot of useful information if you're on either side. But let me go through real quick what a golf cart is. A golf cart is a machine that is not more than 1,800 pounds, and it's not designed to be operated at more than, it says 25 miles an hour, but it's actually 20 miles an hour. That's the golf cart. Now, between 20 and 25 miles an hour, so 25 miles an hour and below, is the low-speed vehicle. The golf cart has really no restrictions from the National Traffic Highway Administration that requires equipment and such. But once you get to the low-speed vehicle, they're required to have equipment such as a rated windshield, turn signals, stoplights, and that type of thing. So there's a concern that people would, and what was in the documentation that I've had, is that people would modify them a little bit so they could go a little bit faster. And that would move a golf cart into a requirement for additional equipment to be a low-speed vehicle. Once you get over the 25 mile an hour speed, then other national traffic safety administration rules kick in, and they have to have all the equipment that a car would have.
Low-speed vehicles are also currently prohibited in Bel Aire? Is that
Yes.
true? Okay.
Although at the Catholic Care Center, they have some that they use on property. There's a yellow one, and they also use golf carts for maintenance throughout the facility.
But they don't take those out onto the street.
Public
No,
roads.
they don't. The concern is that once we open this up, if it's not done in a very controlled fashion, then we could have some unintended consequences. That's my concern. That we could open the door to people wanting to drive on 45th and on 53rd and Rock Road and Woodlawn and Oliver, not just in our slower movement areas where there's a 30 mile an hour speed zone in our residential areas. So people going from one spot to another. Now, there's no prohibition in the statute that keeps somebody from going from one 30 mile an hour area to another 30 mile an hour area across someplace that is a higher speed. That's allowed for in the statute. And the STO, the standard traffic ordinance that we use. So there's a lot of information here that we could go over. Of the cities that we studied, and that's on this sheet, and I think all but one of these allow golf carts. And we tried to pick some smaller cities around our region that have them, and there's several. I've talked to the chiefs from those departments, and there are usually some expletives associated with the discussion of golf carts because people don't follow the rules, and it puts them in a really bad situation to where you've got somebody who's a good citizen doing things, letting the kid ride on their lap and steer the golf cart and taking corners too fast and things that are dangerous. So but of those places that have golf carts, you'll see are in the far right column, the majority of them have a set of standards that they've written into their ordinance that people have to follow before they're able to register with the city and then operate the golf cart on the roadways. So, but you'll see that on that they have age restrictions, driver's license need. They have speed restrictions, times of operation, whether there's a registration, how often that registration is, and who does the registration, the requirement for insurance, which, and this can't be covered usually under your homeowner's insurance. You have to get a rider, a second rider on your automobile insurance, I believe is correct. And then the capacity, who's been to a golf cart and seen way too many people, or a golf course and seen way too many people on a golf cart? Yes. Whether they can be used on sidewalk areas, and I'll point out that some of these are not addressed, but at least one says not on sidewalks, and that would be a recommendation that we would have. And the requirement for a slow-moving vehicle emblem on the backside. So I'll stand for questions. Or sit for questions.
So, my thing is, so when it says it's allowed, that they allow them on their city streets.
They, by ordinance, have decided to allow them to operate on their city streets.
But yet the police chiefs you've talked to have all said, I really wish we didn't.
Yeah.
Okay.
They're concerned. In this larger document, it has information about injury rates, and that they're higher profile, that people drive them sometimes too fast, and that when they're involved in a collision, either with a car or a fixed object, that injuries occur much more frequently than in a car or in a low-speed vehicle that has seatbelts, because the golf carts normally don't have seatbelts.
Right.
Some of the locales here on this list require seatbelts. One of them on there requires helmets and other things, but it's up to the community, the elected officials, to determine whether or not they're going to have them, and two, what the restrictions are going to be if they are going to be allowed.
I'll tell you, initially, my concerns, for reasons for being against, or like I said, I don't want us to look like a retirement community. B, I also can glad to see there's restrictions on here, because I could see some kid, 12, 13, going out and having fun, joyriding, crossing Woodlawn or something. But I certainly understand, what Andrew's point of view, where a couple weeks ago, my wife and I were at Treetop Nursery. We were looking at adding a couple new trees. We hop on a golf cart because they got acres and acres of trees there. It's in a contained environment. Different than private property. And I've seen that where, you hop on the golf cart to go look at a property or something. If we were to do this, would it be something that we could, say, just allow in Central Park, but we have to put up signs that say golf carts allowed or something, or would it be citywide? I mean,
that would be something that I would look at Jackie Kelly and ask for her input.
I think if you're going to do it one place, you should do it all citywide.
I'm just asking. I'm not saying yay or nay.
Yeah, maybe it's all neighborhoods. It's okay.
But my opinion is we allow bicycles, and they ride Woodlawn, and sometimes they're out in the middle of the street instead over at the side, because they go by my house and cars are honking at them to get over.
And I would point out, by state statute, they're allowed to have the whole lane of traffic.
Well, that's true, but not a 3-year-old kid.
Well, I haven't seen any 3-year-old kids.
I have.
So I mean, but can we write it that golf carts are allowed on residential streets, but not main thoroughfares? But then do we have to put up signs, golf cart, with like the Ghostbuster sign on 45th Woodlawn, Rock, 53rd, 37th, and then golf carts allowed? I mean, it's really getting sticky.
You could write it that way. The issue is going to come up at connecting the residential neighborhoods, so unless you identify the specific streets and mile markers where you're allowing it, then it's kind of, when an officer stops somebody, is this within the realm of what's allowed or what's not? And certain residential streets cross over major streets, or arterial streets, is that what we call them? They cross over those streets, so you have to kind of work that in. It may be more practical if you were going to apply something to restrict it to certain neighborhoods.
Mr. Mayor?
Yeah.
But couldn't you also add that they could cross over this street, the arterial streets,
You could.
as safety provides,
You could.
Like
but they just can't drive on them?
Andover's specifically states is not prohibited from crossing any public highway,
Yeah.
street, road, or alley.
And that's in keeping with the current, somewhat in keeping with the current state statute, because down at the bottom of the staff report, it can be operated on the street or highway only during sunset, sunrise, if it's allowed, and then, it's in B, shall not prohibit a golf cart from crossing a federal or state highway or a street or a highway with a posted speed limit in excess of 30 miles an hour. So you can cross, even if it's 70, you can cross. But they're slow lumbering vehicles, they're not real fast, and that would cause some concern. Not as much at 40, certainly at 70.
Well, personally, I think they should be allowed in all areas, and it'll help with his problem in Central Park of taking people around, because we've had bicycles in Bel Aire for years. They aren't even anymore on license. Used to, we sent them to the city hall to get a license, and they don't do that anymore. They had to have a tag. But I think you could add the seat belts, because it's not too hard to go to O'Reilly's and buy a set of seat belts.
Is it possible to, let me ask this, Chief, is it possible to even tag one of these at the tag office?
So no, they're a non-highway vehicle.
You know, I mean, that right there gives me some pause. If the state says we can't tag them, you know, what happens? I mean, tags are good for identification and.
Well, that's where the city licensing
Right.
comes into play.
I mean, I'd want them to be
Probably
visible and.
They'd probably get a sticker, kind of like on your license plate. This is for 2019, a red sticker that goes on. So that's how that would be accomplished, I would surmise.
Yeah, there again, like Andover says, must register with the police department. The registration decal must be visibly displayed on the rear of the golf cart.
I'd like to hear from our other council members.
I think it's a good idea to look at how we can safely enable golf carts for people to use. I connect with the safety concerns, and here I also connect with Councilmember Martine's comments that, from a safety perspective, is this really that different than, like bicycles on the street, which I realize are separately legalized by state statute and not really up for discussion here, but it is an interesting parallel, and different people have different preferences on how to use transportation, and if we can find a way to enable that safely for the community and help sell homes in Central Park and the rest of the community, all for anything that we can do to support that. So,
Well, our maintenance people have one of those box things, don't they?
Yeah,
And they drive it on the street.
they do sometimes, yeah.
Are you sure you don't want a fleet of little scooters to run around?
I hear somebody's going to have a bunch of orange ones.
Okay, so I say that in jest.
They
So do
drag
I.
that out of the river.
Yeah, I'm sympathetic to what you're asking for, and especially in your position as a realtor, I get that it's super convenient to hop on the golf cart and all that. And, but I don't know, I guess I'm just not sold on, in terms of, we have all this data in front of us and information, and the real problem here is that I think this is one of those kind of floodgate issues, because look, I want our residents and everybody to have as much freedom as possible, and if people want to get whatever they want to run around on their property, that's great. But we've created a society here where we have all kinds of perhaps thousands of laws that dictate our traffic behavior and how we use our roads. And the roads have been, purposely designed and restricted in such a way that it favors large vehicle traffic, and our society is built around the automobile and the truck and all that. And it seems like there's an awful lot of risk here. First of all, it seems like if we were to carve out, because I've been thinking, well, can't we create some kind of policy that's very narrowly focused towards even allowing just realtors or some genre of people that like would readily use this and it would be friendly to their business and all that, and I get that. But the hard part is we'd have to create a set of ordinances that would be real specific, real narrowly cut, and then, the next person that comes along, we see there's this vast spectrum of vehicles, right? It's not automobiles and cars. And in the last 10 years, the whole advent of the John Deere Gator class, all these UTVs and everything, they're blurring that line between a golf cart and an automobile. And we would have to get into that in our ordinances. We would have to shape them in such a way we'd have to agree upon where that line is split between now it's an automobile type or what is acceptable beyond the capabilities of a regular golf cart. And I think the amount of kind of ordinance creation that would have to take place to accommodate any sort of narrow swath that wouldn't just be a carte blanche, hey, any sort of motorized vehicle, we're just going to open up the streets. I don't see that happening. And I think it's anything short of that is just kind of ordinance-wise, it gets really sticky, and there's all kinds, and there's going to have to be people advocating for one particular type of vehicle over the other. And to me, it just seems like it's an awful lot of risk. And Chief, you mentioned you've had a couple of people over the years contact you, or recently a couple. Like, how many per year do you think ask, "Hey, can I get a golf cart or some kind of?"
In the past 5 years, I think 2.
Okay.
And this is one.
So that's my impression. If there were like hundreds of people in this room or sending us letters or emails or lots of people saying, "Hey, we really want this," I would definitely be way more open to accommodating that. But it seems like there's almost no desire for this, but for a handful of people. And the chief kind of mentioned there's this kind of potential for a kind of opening the floodgates to once we set up our ordinance, whatever it's going to look like. And frankly, I think narrowing down to a specific neighborhood or street, I think that's going to be so hard to enforce. I mean, there's people on my street driving around on motorized little mini bikes every once in a while, and I mean, people are going to do that, and I just think that from like our standpoint, from creating the ordinance and all that, I just think we're opening ourselves up to so much nitty-gritty details that have to be addressed, and I don't think there's a demand for this amongst the community. I don't think the risk is worth it. I mean, my first thought when I was thinking about this is like, how many people are going to think, "Oh, I'll go to Dillon's in my golf cart," even if that were not okay. I mean, it probably, I don't know, we'd have to have some sort of agreement with Wichita. I can't imagine being at 37th and Woodlawn in a golf cart. I mean, that's going to happen, I mean, people are going to think.
Chief and I talked, Wichita doesn't allow it on there.
Well, exactly, but
I've seen golf carts at Dillon's.
Well, I don't
2 of them. I don't know where they came from, but
I don't know. I don't see a whole lot of value here in us taking this up as a thing. I mean, I get it. I get how it helps you out as a business owner, but it just doesn't seem like there's enough people that want this in our community. And our community is so diverse. I mean, Bel Aire, we've got old Bel Aire that's got, gravel roads, and people have multiple acred yards, and we're like an XUV or whatever would make sense. And I mean, I'm not entirely sure, but could someone have that on their own? As they keep it on their own property, they can operate it, right? That's my understanding. So, I mean, I get that there might be a few people that want to get these vehicles and drive them around, even for recreation, which just as a thing, I'm okay with in terms of, yeah, that'd be kind of cool. But the problem is there's an awful lot of laws, ordinances, things that have to be created, and it'll be an enforcement issue because there's not going to be a lot of people using it. And I don't know. I just think it's a lot of complication at the government level that kind of, I don't think there's enough of a need for it to justify us getting into that. But I guess that's kind of
It'll
what
be
I was
coming
thinking.
down the pike because some of us are getting older.
Yeah, I mean, I think they're definitely around the nation. There's certain communities that are set up for low-speed vehicles and golf carts. There are retirement communities that are specifically made to. I mean, their entire speed limit inside the whole complex is 15 miles per hour. When you start talking about this and you say golf carts, well, then the person that wants the low-speed vehicle, because the one on the screen, it looks similar to a golf cart, but I've played online looking at low-speed vehicles. There's some neat little that look like mini cars, and I mean they're set up with tail lights and brake lights and headlights and windshield wipers and turn signals, and so I would rather have that than a golf cart, because then you'd even say, well, it's safer because I can let everybody know how I'm going and everything like that. So then do you expand it then? And then somebody with one of the high-speed vehicles that have all that stuff too, that are made, pre-made with turn signals and brake lights, and they're still not taggable because they're not highway. But then they're like, well, what about us? And then my other concern about safety is we've got a couple of places here in town. There's Woodlawn Court, there's Rodeo, that there's no crossing traffic. I mean, so somebody lives there that wants a golf cart that wants to drive around town on the residential streets. Well, what do? Because they're not allowed to drive on the Woodlawn, but if you're on Woodlawn Court, you can't cross into another section, so you're kind of stuck. So do we let them bypass and go, okay, well, you can be on Woodlawn from here to here to get over here? I just think that I'm with Jeff and just saying that the squeeze is not worth the juice on this one. I mean, I think it's just safety wise and just the need is not there to address it at this point, I believe.
Chief, do we currently allow the mini bikes and motorized bicycles on the road?
They're not supposed to be operated on the streets. And when we see them, and I've seen a couple, usually kids operating them, you stop them and go, hey, you're not supposed to do that. And they abide, okay, go on home, don't do this. And we don't have a problem. Yeah, I imagine some of them continue, sneak a look up and down the street and go for a little ride.
Oh, he's gone.
And that's just the reality of human nature. Kind of like, and there's been some reference, we have stop signs. We have speed zones. We have lines on the street. And we can't keep people from not speeding, running stop signs, and crossing the lines. That's human nature. And if we allow these, and I know it's very cynical, but to expect people to follow the rules when their safety is involved, like that, that raises some concern for me. Because not everybody's responsible.
I don't have a strong opinion on this one way or the other. I did read the draft or the ordinance from Wakefield, and I thought it had some good stuff in it. If we wanted to pursue this policy, that could probably be a guide for us. But I don't have a strong opinion one way or the other. But just clarify for me, if you would, Chief. Currently, do we allow these golf carts on sidewalks at all? Or
No.
No.
They're not allowed on streets or sidewalks?
Right.
Okay, only on private property. All right, just want to make sure I understood that.
So my thought here, and I can certainly understand the safety concerns, the main road concerns. I understand, diving in and you're opening a can of worms, but as we all sat here and said, we're acknowledging people are already starting to take vehicles out on the roads in the first place. If you look at Andover's breakdown, they've got basically 5 categories broken out of these vehicles, and they've got regulations on each one of them that you go there and you find out what you need to do for that vehicle, and there's bullet points to do it. You know, at the moment, I totally see what you're saying, where you get confined into neighborhoods because we only have 40-mile-an-hour drags through the city, so you are contained in a sense. My hope and thought would be, though, the conversation starts today with these vehicles and translates into this new bike plan. And if we're going to widen out Woodlawn, can that be something that's considered in the expansion of Woodlawn with the bike paths to allow people to get around town a little more easy without being out on these 40-mile-an-hour roads with nowhere to go? Which, in the safety, I get it. You know, I have a hard time, though, not going back to saying, how are these any more dangerous than a motorcycle or a bicycle? Or, I mean, you know, I don't know. To me, they're, you know, that's also a slippery slope. You're saying these are not allowed because they're too dangerous. So when are we going to start banning bicycles? When are we going to start banning motorcycles? When are we going to start banning convertibles? And, you know, I mean...
Is it the city's duty to protect people from themselves?
Correct.
Is the question.
I mean, in my opinion on that, I mean, you know, a lot of that is mandated by federal or at the very least state level. And, you know, when you start talking about individual towns making their own laws for traffic and for vehicles that are allowed, I think that's where you start getting that slippery slope. As you said, you know, people are already taking things out on the roads, but that doesn't, in my opinion, that doesn't make it right, or you should change the law because it's already happening. I mean, I can't tell you how many people just run right through a red light when they're turning right. It happens all the time, so it doesn't mean that should be legal just because everybody's doing it. So, you know, again, I'm not for it at this time. I think as the city progresses, I think that's maybe something to look at in the future, and as far as building out for the possibility of it. But you know, once we start getting some you know, commercial areas where we want people to congregate and we want people to get to, if we have a little shop with, you know, some local eateries and things like that, you know, I think that's a good thing to think about in the future to build out to. But I think as it sits now, I'm against it.
Is this, I'm looking for the Bel Aire Heights Homeowners Association meeting. Is it downstairs?
So, I guess right now, if we're looking, the purpose of the workshop here is where we kind of hash through things to see if we want to move forward to the agenda. I have to tell you right now, I'm not hearing an overwhelming sense that we need to take immediate action on it. I myself can make an argument for and against right now. So,
Well, I still say I'm for.
I get you.
Yeah, I think the one interesting thing that Councilmember Elsoff brought up is that right now there's not a lot of demand for this, which I also think means that if we were to allow this, there wouldn't be that much impact to the city. It would enable the uses that we need, whereas right now we're kind of banning it, suspecting that it might cause a problem instead of, you know, allowing people to, you know, the freedom to drive, you know, the vehicles that they think are appropriate, you know, around their neighborhoods and in a safe way if they're a licensed driver, and then saying, oh no, this has actually caused problems, we can't allow it because of a number of things that we've experienced because of that.
So, I guess my question is, do we want to go ahead and move forward to take action? Right now, or do we want to let this marinate a little bit longer?
I'm okay either way. The one thing I am a little about is we're not going to see overwhelming demand. Somebody's going to invest in a golf cart if they can't drive it. So you never. I mean, they're going to ask the question more times, or they'll just buy one and then you know, there'll be a violation of the ordinance because we don't have the permission for it.
there might be a developer out there that wants to build a golf cart community on some of the many acres of land that we have for sale, and because we have this ordinance in place, they aren't even going to
swayed a lot if that were
we've got it all for sitting here at our table.
Justin, they would have the opportunity to build specific golf tracks too, golf cart tracks in that community that would.
But I think
support
that again,
this.
though, it's the progression of the city as a whole, and I think it is a little bit of chicken and the egg. We talk about maybe discussing this in the future, when there's more amenities, but how do you ever even, how do you go to those conversations if you've never even tried it out to know how do you incorporate that in? How do you make that part of your conversations when we're talking about future growth, future development, bike paths, expansion? To me, it needs to be out there and experienced to find out how can that be incorporated into the plans.
All right, well, I think, we have a request. I've got no problem moving this forward as an agenda item to take action.
What we could do, Mayor, if it's okay, is maybe allow staff to put together, using this information from other cities and kind of come up with a proposal.
Yeah.
Bring it to your next workshop, and then
Let's do that. That buys us a few weeks, too.
Tell us what we want and don't want.
And if Andrew's selling a house, just don't stop him between now and then.
Hey,
I'm trying to think of sellers.
What I meant was...
Since he controls a lot of the properties, he can just drive through his own.
There we go, drive through the property. Don't go on city streets, yeah.
So if this
that'd be
passed, how
horrible
many
if he had
houses do you
people in the
sell?
cart and they got stopped.
Reasonable question.
I think we're chicken and the egg a little bit.
Everyone knows that was a jest, a joke. Clear the air, just...
Please,
I think it brings more citizens.
take a break.
All righty. Well, I appreciate you bringing this
thank
to
you.
our attention.
Thank
Lots
you.
of
Appreciate you
interesting
guys' time.
information, and
Thank you, appreciate it.
this is another one of those things I never realized we discuss as mayor. To the list of that. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. For that, we want to move on to sidewalks now, which is something that we spent quite a bit of time in the last council meeting talking about, mainly code enforcement. And this sprung from some letters that were sent to individuals, letting them know that they're responsible for stuff that's on their property. So for sidewalks that are on their property. So I'm going to kind of turn it over to our city manager and city attorney for this one. I do want to point out that a letter did go out to the citizens being asked to replace portions of their sidewalks last week. And the topic was added, obviously, here to our workshop. So, Jackie, if you can talk to us about city codes as well as state statutes, and maybe kind of go over your report a little bit.
Sure. So the city code on sidewalks is based on state statute, and state statute imposes the responsibility for maintaining the sidewalk in front of a person's home on that homeowner. 85% of cities do it this way. And I think that showed up in some research that council had shared. So I say that because in my report I mentioned that we cannot charter out of this. Well, I was able to do some more research and speak to people, and
You went off.
Okay.
and the ability to charter in or out of. Oh, got another one. This should pause a little bit.
Okay, can you hear us?
You there, Jim?
again, for those watching at home, we're just waiting to try to connect Jim via his computer. Make sure he can hear us.
Can you hear us, Jim?
And it's like we're having some technical
Use
difficulties
sign
with that
language.
connection.
We can hear him.
Yeah.
And I took his earbuds out.
Just send him a quick text to see what he says.
No, I didn't have anything to do with this.
Can you hear us?
Can you hear me?
There we go.
Yes.
Now we can. Okay, he says he cannot hear us. I said that we could hear him.
You can hear me?
Yes.
No, I'm not hearing you guys. Maybe you're not saying anything.
Yeah, someone should be, put your face in front so he knows you're talking to him.
Yeah. Well, I'm texting him,
Oh,
so.
I don't know if it's his internet or ours. I don't think it's ours. Sorry, guys.
No problem.
it's okay.
That computer we were using has a bunch of Adobe programs on it, slowing it down, so I figured mine would be just fine, but obviously we're having the same issue.
Okay.
Let me end this call.
You want me to FaceTime from my phone? Since Liberty's not responding. I'm wondering if he's got something on his end because he's not responding to my text either.
Now you're all going to try to call him. He's going to be busy.
No, this is just one of us. Jeff, are you texting him too?
No.
Okay, good. Yeah, let's just let's not all board him.
Quick your... All right. You can go back to the phone.
You guys are staff. You take an hour's time off of his.
Sorry, Jackie. Sorry, guys.
Yeah, we're using Jackie's personal phone here, aren't we?
Good intentions.
Okay.
Let's just do that because I don't want to
I hope you.
Well, thanks, Ted, for trying.
I hope you don't go by minutes, Jackie.
Thank you.
All right, so Jackie, if you want to go and continue kind of going over your report there now that we're all back here.
Yes, so just to recap a little bit, our code is tied to state statute. State statute says it imposes that responsibility on the homeowner. In my report, I had mentioned that we could not charter out. And chartering is somewhat of a gray area in the law where a lot of it depends on interpretation of a specific law. A lot of people find out that they shouldn't have chartered because of a lawsuit or that they could have chartered because no one bothers them and they chartered out of it. So in discussions, I'm kind of compelled to update my report a bit and say there may be a possibility to charter out because certain sections of the state statute are not uniformly not applicable, but uniformly inclusive in certain ways. So I hate to be unclear, but the most important thing you'll want to know is that there is a possibility for council to charter out of making sidewalks the responsibility of the homeowner. That said, as your attorney, I would strongly caution that because the reason why 85% of cities don't take that on is because of the specific liability when an incident happens and the inability to man every sidewalk in the neighborhood and make sure that it looks the way it did last time you inspected it, and getting people out there and things like that. There's a reason why it's written that way. However, if you'd like to pursue that option, we can do some research and definitely follow up on that. But I would say take that with quite a bit of caution. And so that's where we are on the law. With that, we'll go to our current situation, which is that staff sent out some letters, sent out about 30 last month. And just to show, I had us look at the process for enforcement. So we'll stick with slide 1, the first slide that we just had. Yeah. So of those 30 letters, the genesis for those letters were complaint-driven. 18 were complaint-driven from neighboring residents requesting repair. We got 2 more after those letters went out, 2 more complaints. 2 sidewalk repairs were noted during visits to, during the Edmore Street repair project. Somebody noticed it and advised staff. Probably Public Works noticed it at that time, or I'm not sure. Somebody noticed it there. And 1 came from damage done by a contractor, probably neighboring, and 8 were noted while inspecting. So of the 30, 8 were our inspector or code enforcement officer out on the street noticing something was in disrepair. So that's what, as of now, that's how Bel Aire drives the sidewalk enforcement project. It seems to be primarily complaint driven. Next slide. As far as the longevity of the program, 19 addresses were notified in 2018. So 19 of the 30 folks who got letters received a letter last year. Because of staffing concerns and funding concerns as well, those 19 addresses just received a notice and were not enforced upon. We just had our code enforcement officer leave like in the middle of a season. So that was kind of tough, and it took some time to get Stephanie in place, and other priorities jumped to the front of the list. So 19 got a letter, but no kind of enforcement in 2018. Actually, it was the same letter that went out. 10 new addresses were identified this year, and they would have been through the process that we showed you on the other slide.
Can you tell me, I'm sorry, were those letters sent certified, or were they just sent first-class mail?
Those would have been sent first-class mail, because certified letters come later on within an abatement process. So, and then give you some visibility on the scope of the project on the next slide. So staff has identified sidewalks with small cracks. These are called grade 1 sidewalk repairs. These are patchwork projects that can sometimes be done by a homeowner. We had a homeowner come speak at the last council meeting, and he mentioned being able to repair his own. This would have been the type of sidewalk he would have repaired. Our code does allow homeowners to repair those on their own. There's no licensing requirement in those. Of course, the final inspection has to be done by the city. Just because it's a public right-of-way, we have to sign off on it.
Is there a fee for that?
No, not as of now. That's something you would have an option to.
Is there a permanent record of that? The
There-
city's inspection?
There is a record that our code enforcement department keeps. Between Keith and Stephanie, they record it.
I'm not in favor of adding a fee.
Okay.
For the record.
You have options. Okay.
If a homeowner wanted to replace the full section, would they be allowed to do that?
We'll get to that. But you're thinking in the right direction. I'd like to kind of progress to that, if I can answer your question as we go along. So grade 2 sidewalk repairs require leveling, and this sort of attempt, this is an attempt that some homeowners can make. They do require leveling and stabilization of the entire slab. Typically, this is trickier and does require a contractor, but the city does not require a license for this sort of repair, and a homeowner could do this. Now, where leveling doesn't work, the next step is often ripping out the sidewalk and starting over, which kind of points to what Councilmember Bernage is talking about. These are the most serious sidewalk issues, and these aren't just because of sensitivity to homeowners. We didn't pick specific addresses in our neighborhoods, but these are similar pictures to what you might see when you need a grade 3 sidewalk repair. You can tell that some of that is leveling, but it's just leveling that's just gotten out of control. Or maybe could have been leveling at one point.
Long time ago.
Maybe, yeah. Yeah, so these are grade 3. Some of these do exist in Bel Aire. Again, the most common are the cracks. You see some grade 2 repairs, and there are some grade 3 repairs that have to be done, and they do look like this. I think the inspector mentioned that the picture on the right with the tree in it, we don't have anything that bad. That's about over 8 inches off. Our most severe would be about 4 or 5 inches. So just to show. These require a licensed contractor because you're having to take out the slab, obviously, and abutting pieces and replace with new sidewalks. So that person would have to come in and have a license. So for a homeowner to repair this sort of damage, they would have to come in and get a contractor's license to repair it themselves, or get a permit to and be a contractor.
Well, license, but permit, okay.
Get a permit, right?
And a license?
And be licensed. Yeah, because in
Well,
order
they need to be licensed to do it.
to get the permit requires a licensed contractor. So to get this, you need the permit and you need to be licensed to do grade 3 repairs. You have to be bonded and insured. That's the issue. So
That's our requirement or a
Yes.
state requirement?
that's our requirement.
Our requirement.
Yes. And of course, these require, once they're repaired, they require inspection by the city. The reason, something that's jumping out of my head is you have to pour concrete, and there are some special licensing requirements whenever you pour concrete. I don't know the details of that, but that's what ties this to the group that has to be licensed in some ways. So those are the type of repairs we're seeing in Bel Aire. And so now we get to, I'm wrapping up, Mr. Mayor, the
Fine, no,
options.
take your time. No, I'm not.
The options available to you, like I said, amendment to my report is there is the option to charter out of this. Option 2 would be look at our enforcement program and see, maybe make minor tweaks, charging fees, extending notice periods, etc. 3 is to look at some other options that other cities are doing, which include various forms of cost-sharing programs. The various forms of cost-sharing programs sometimes include, Ty mentioned one, which was going after grants, and the city would pursue a grant to improve sidewalks and then put that in a pot, and then as neighborhoods need sidewalk repairs, offset the cost of those repairs with grant money. The city isn't taking ownership and responsibility for making those repairs. The city is just reimbursing citizens for a portion of the cost of those repairs. So that's how grants play into this. The city could also set aside money to do sidewalk repairs in neighborhoods. One program staff was impressed with was in Augusta, I believe. They set aside money and do like a 50-50 cost sharing. So a person fixes a slab, city offers to pay 50% of that repair. Only in situations where it's an older neighborhood, because new neighborhoods, it's a little bit different. You kind of have to put those in a different area of your mind, because those properties are usually under special assessments and neighbors are already paying for the installation of that sidewalk. So to offset their repairs would be almost somewhat double dipping, if that makes sense. The city has loaned that neighborhood money to install sidewalks and then also give them money for repairs. That could be
Just as
kind
bigger
of
than we are,
interesting.
and they've got more money because
Right.
their taxes are higher.
Right. But this Bel Aire could set aside money for that, and staff can look at different options if you wanted that to happen. So it looks like 3 categories of options: change the code, charter out, change the code in minor ways, or implement a cost sharing program.
Appreciate the report. Let's see, I I'm probably not in favor of chartering now just because one big word you used was liability. I don't,
Can you talk a little bit about the liability? Dave?
yeah.
So the liability, it's going to show up in different ways. It's going to be a case-by-case basis. But you increase your exposure, I guess would be what I would say. The liability for, so if a city, currently, if a city doesn't know about the repair and it's in front of someone's home and someone were to get injured, depending on the facts, I'm not going to make legal analysis on camera here, depending on the facts, that homeowner could be liable for that person's injuries. Here, because of the way that the law falls, I mean, you go back and trace who's responsible. When the city says, no, we're responsible, the starting point for that assessment now goes from being the homeowner to the city. And then you start breaking down whether or not the city knew, how much time they had taken, how many resources, was it marked. There are other analyses that happen further down, but you're starting at a point of taking on that responsibility.
So one of the things that I'd read about the liability was an analysis that said that homeowners are liable for the repair of the sidewalk in Kansas, but their liability is to the city, not to the general public for the maintenance of that sidewalk. And so their liability is limited to the city and not to the, so they wouldn't be liable for your typical trip and fall type
Not necessarily.
activities. And so I was curious what your assessment of that was.
Yeah, not necessarily. I think that that's going to come down to the city is in charge of overseeing the sidewalks because we lay out the law. But as far as a civil suit, if somebody's sidewalk is damaged and it's in front of their home and they're aware of it and they're not maintaining it, there's an opportunity for a suit there. And I don't think that would the relief would be, or that suit would get dismissed without some sort of major failure of the city to normally enforce their program. So.
Okay.
My other thing that stood out to me most interesting fact was that 19 of the 29 received a letter over a year ago. So it's more of these complaints are more the issue have come because we're actually saying, hey, what we told you to do more than a year ago, we really meant it.
Well, and I almost think we should evaluate this issue kind of maybe ignoring the fact that we, had this, these letters go out. Maybe we ignore the fact that, we've heard from a lot of concerned citizens about this specific instance, and we should really think about, as a city, how do we want sidewalks to work, and who do we think should pay for sidewalks and bear the financial burden for sidewalk maintenance going forward? And I guess maybe that'd be the question that I'd want to understand from the rest of the council is what the point of view is on just overall who should pay for sidewalks.
Well, with 85% of cities saying that, going with state statute saying it's the homeowner's responsibility, it is the realtor's responsibility. I mean, they're taught that in class. I mean, the problem you have with it is you have too many realtors. Honestly, there's too many realtors, and some of these realtors are doing it part-time. They're doing one, maybe two houses a year, and they neglect to do their job and inform a potential home buyer that sidewalk is their responsibility. So then you kind of have, somebody saying, well, we didn't know, we weren't told. I mean, obviously ignorance is no excuse for the law, but that's a separate issue. But, if somebody says they didn't know, that's, the realtor should have told them when they bought the house. That's, 100% always. I've known that since I was a little kid. When my parents had to, replace a couple pieces of sidewalk. I mean, it was just, it's just what you did. You took care of it. I'm still kind of for that. I do like the idea of trying to get some grants to, if the possibility comes up to help offset some of the costs to help out, because it is a public right of way and it would be nice to do, but ultimately I think it does come down to the homeowner.
To me, the way I look at that too is sidewalk, if it's on your property, it's your responsibility. We see it all the time with these new developments. Special assessments are for sidewalks. The city's not paying for it. The taxpayers aren't paying for it. I'll tell you right now, in front of my house, I don't have a sidewalk. So then what about all these cul-de-sacs where there are no cul-de-sac? Are they then going to come and want the city to put sidewalks in? Talk about slippery slope here, if we're going to change things with that. And then how come this new neighborhood gets sidewalks, this one doesn't? I mean, obviously I have to grandfather some stuff in there. I'm hearing kind of what, I think what some of the is maybe we could soften our request. You know, but at the same time, we don't want to pick and choose, oh, we're going to enforce this, we're not going to enforce that, and pick and choose, you know, for that. My other thought too is, you know, we have public, you know, right-of-way easements with, when it comes to utilities that run in yards. Well, if I have one that was in my backyard, I still have to mow that. It's not the city's responsibility to come in and mow that just because there's a, you know, because that one strip is a quote-unquote public easement. So, yeah, a lot of, and then there's the, you know, are there sidewalks? I just lost my train of thought on that. Yeah, so, but the fact that, yeah, 85% of other cities, you know, require the homeowner, you know, Justin brings, Councilmember Smith brings up a good point too, but, you know, liability, what is the liability? That, does that open up to all of a sudden, oh, the city has a lot deeper pockets than Mr. and Mrs. John Doe here, homeowner association. I don't know.
Mr. Mayor,
Yeah.
question for
Okay.
Odette.
Okay, hold on, Jim. We'll come to you in a second.
Okay.
Sorry.
I'd like to ask Mr. Lasher a question. Years ago, we used to write like the sidewalks and street signs and all that stuff. They were individual papers that they put in a folder type thing that was passed out to new residents when they moved in, or we gave some to the realtors. It wasn't all that tough to make this stuff up, like the sidewalks and the backflow system and things that, the policies that we enforce. Are they still doing that?
I don't think we are, those specifically, but that's something we can certainly look
But
at.
I think if when somebody moves in, if you give them these letters, like the sidewalk is your responsibility in front of your home, and mowing the easements, I can't remember what was all in that package because I made those up, but you just made them, you just kept recopying until that ordinance changed, and then you had to go get a new ordinance. But I think if the, and it doesn't take that much time to copy that off and develop it into a packet. It gives the people, okay, I know I have to pay for this sidewalk if it's busted, or fix your driveway, or whatever you have to do. But I think that would be one of these things that, because the people that called me or emailed, well, I didn't know that sidewalk was mine. I didn't know I had to fix it. And I said, well, did you get a letter before? Well, all but one said, no, they didn't.
That's what I think goes back to, if we want to look at how we do this, I think it needs to be a certified letter would be my recommendation first and foremost at the very least, so that then we have, so that they do know. I like the idea too of some public education, public information campaigns, especially through social media and everything.
Well, I just gave them the packet and told them to read it at their leisure time and put everything in there from the planning commission when the council meets, the newspaper and all that stuff. So I said, you know, it's your responsibility to read this because they don't have time to sit there and you explain everything to them.
Councilmember Benaj wanted to weigh in on this.
Oh.
Community service. Community service. That's a new water package. Okay.
But I do remember other communities having done welcome packages. But one of the things that occurred to me is that on our new
But I think something
development,
like
we
that.
require sidewalks to be put in, and we have certain standards that we site. Or if a homeowner association wanted to take responsibility for it, then let them take it in. That's their area, if they wanted to do that. I don't know if you want to make that a requirement in an ordinance, but you might make it an option for them. Anyway, it's just an idea that occurred to me. I don't know if anybody else thinks about it. This seems to me wholly unfair for one person to have, and like the gentleman came to the council meeting last week, he apparently had several feet of sidewalk that needed to be fixed. He said, but my neighbor across the street he doesn't have to deal with all the things I got to deal with on the sidewalk. So, but he's taking advantage of that sidewalk in there, which he would because it's a public property. Anyway, so it just seems like that maybe that would be a way we could make that a fairer assessment so that they all the property owners in that improvement district pay for any maintenance of sidewalks. Just an idea.
Mr. Mayor.
Yeah.
Just to kind of play devil's advocate for what Jim was just saying, there's when you're buying a home, there's many things to think about when you're buying a home. One of it is the sidewalks. Another one is are you backed up or adjacent to a major road? Another one is do you have a major right-of-way? I mean, we hear complaints all the time from people that said, well, I thought the lot across the street was going to be open the entire time. I didn't know anything was going to get built there. If somebody buys a brand new house, they don't sometimes realize, well, I have to provide shades for the entire place. The city covenant or ordinance requires grass, so I have to put grass in. I mean, there's many things that come with being a homeowner, and this is, to me, this is one of them that just becomes, part of being a homeowner and what you have to take care of. My driveway is going to need replaced very soon. I didn't put it in, contractor did, but it's going to be my requirement to replace it. So, I mean, it's just part of being a homeowner on that front.
Mr. Mayor? Yeah. I think the interesting point that Jim's bringing up is, the sidewalks really are there to serve the community. Whereas, my driveway is there to serve me. And so it makes a lot of sense for me to pay to replace my driveway. But I connected and wholly agree with what Councilmember Minaj was saying about the sidewalks serving more than the folks that are tasked with paying for them. And for that reason, I think we should find a way to have the community share in the cost of funding the sidewalks, whether that be through a cost-sharing program or through improvement districts or whatever the mechanism might be. The sidewalks are funded in the same way that streets are, through special assessments on the neighborhood. And the city then takes over, maintaining the streets in the neighborhoods to make sure people can drive their cars around. The city currently does not take over the sidewalk to make sure that people can still walk around. We then turn to the homeowner that just happens to be located next to where the sidewalk is and say, congratulations, you get to take care of paying for these sidewalks as they need repaired. And that just doesn't seem right to me. I mean, going on the same model, we should really, as a city, not take care of the streets and the neighborhoods, and we should ask the homeowner adjacent to the street to pay for the street repair every time we need to go and do crack sealing in the street or put a new slurry seal on it or whatever that may be. And so I think there's a better way than just requiring the person that just happens to be located next to the sidewalk, serving the whole neighborhood, and requiring that person to pay for it. I don't know what the right way to do that is, but I think there's a better way.
So if I could add a few things from what I'm hearing. I think the street issue, I understand, the city, when we put in a new development, the homeowners via special assessments pay for the street, and then once it's paid for, after it's put in, the city takes over maintenance. I think you could probably argue that, we all pay taxes, so a portion of our taxes go to the street fund, and that helps pay for the fixing up of the streets. So since we all pay taxes, we all use the streets, some of that goes in there. Same thing with police protection, things like that. Because you could make an argument that, for every call you get to your house, you should have to pay for police or fire or whatever.
We should have a sidewalk fund.
Yes. I think the biggest concern that we would have, and Jackie mentioned it, is that the city maintaining is that one, there's the liability, next is the cost. So, you know, one way you could raise additional funds would be to raise the tax, raise the mill levy, and then use that money to set up a sidewalk fund, and the money would go in there, and that would pay to maintain sidewalks. I don't think that we would want, as a city, to take over maintenance, because then it's not only the liability piece, but the snow removal and ice things. So then if the city was maintaining sidewalks, then do we have to go and take all the snow off of it? Do we got to put ice melt down? Not just the maintenance of it. So that's the other concern. So like Jim had mentioned, you have the ability to create benefit districts. So there's two ways those are created. One is you can create it as a governing body, and you could assess the cost to that district. So you would say, okay, in this neighborhood, these are the repairs that need to be done. It's going to cost X amount of dollars, and we're going to special assess all the property owners in that benefit district. And you could just do that. Now, obviously you're going to have people calling in and say, well, the sidewalk's not on my property. Why do I have to pay for it? And, and that's what you're dealing with now. The other piece is then the neighborhood could create a benefit district. Now, what's required of that is they would put a petition forward, just like the petitions you get from developers, and at least 51% of the property owners in that neighborhood or that benefit district would have to agree to pay that special assessment. And then everybody gets special assessed. So if you wanted to create a benefit district, the two ways you would do it is you, as a governing body, would either do that, or you would say Bel Aire Heights, if you want to replace and fix, and maybe they want to add new ones. Thinking of Bel Aire Heights, there's certain streets, like the mayor said, or I think it was Jeff said, that there isn't any sidewalks, and maybe they would say as the neighborhood, well, we want to add sidewalks on these streets and replace these. So we're going to put together a petition and get an estimate, and we're going to special assess that. So that is an option for you to create a special district, a benefit district, and you could do it either way. You could ask the citizens to do it, or you could do it as a governing body.
I'm going to ask one quick question. Keep going back to the liability thing. If the city were responsible for all this, and maybe this is a Ted question, I'm assuming our insurance, not only are we going to then have to pay for maintenance of sidewalks, and like you said, with the snow and ice removal and everything, liability, does our liability insurance go up since they're now public maintained? I know I'm putting you on the spot. I'm sorry. I'm just
I
saying.
threw a question out. I couldn't fathom a guess. The city has a blanket umbrella coverage currently for anything that happens on our property. Now, that would be a question on one of his staff review. Does that fall under the umbrella? So,
Okay.
Mr. Mayor?
Yeah.
Ty, have you researched any grants at all as far as some sidewalk improvement grants or?
No, so there are grants available. My concern of us actually applying and getting grants is a lot of times they're based on need and incomes. So we're going to have to compete with the city of Wichita and certain areas where they have no sidewalks or they're in very bad disrepair and people are on limited incomes, and then they're going to look at us and say, well, you're one of the richest cities in Sedgwick County.
This isn't blight improvement. It's not.
It's not. So why should we give you? That's the struggle. I'm not saying we can't get them. I mean, certainly we would apply. I'm just saying I don't want your assumption to be that staff will get a grant. We'll just do that.
Well, and I mean I'm definitely sympathetic. Don't get me wrong, I'm sympathetic for the homeowners, but I think to just enforce it with a district that includes many houses. I mean, there are people that specifically will go and buy a house because the specials are paid off, and they don't have to worry about things like the sidewalk. And then to it may be somebody that has never taken a walk outside, besides from their car to their house. So to just for us to say, well, for these homeowners, we're going to do this, but you, Mr. Homeowner, I know you bought the house, but you're going to have to pay a special assessment for this. I think that's unfair as well. I'm all for exploring options on how we can, do some cost sharing or something like that, leaving the liability on the homeowners. But, definitely not raising taxes to do it. I mean, if we can figure out a way to help some of these homeowners, I'm all for it, but definitely without the raising taxes on it.
Mr. Mayor, just one interesting thing, totaling up the amount of sidewalks that through the enforcement process this year, we have.
Sorry, Jim's trying to FaceTime me. Okay, you got him? Okay. Sorry, go ahead. Justin, sorry, you were saying?
Yeah, I was just saying that we got this handy printout from staff on all the sidewalk enforcement repairs that were requested this year. I added it up and it looks like there's roughly 78 slabs of sidewalk that need repaired, and I think what I heard was the new estimate for a per slab cost was around $125 per slab.
Yeah.
No more than that, which totals to about $10,000 for sidewalk repair for this year. Okay, so we're not talking about hundreds of thousands of dollars for sidewalk repair like we are for street. It's, something as small as a $5,000 or $10,000 pool of funds available for cost sharing could really go a long way, I think, in alleviating the burden on homeowners for sidewalk repair. I think we're talking about budgeting $20,000 for new carpet here in City Hall, and so just putting that in perspective, sidewalks are pretty important to our community. And there's one homeowner on here that's got 12 slabs identified, and if you think about yourself in that position as that homeowner suddenly getting a letter in the mail from the city one day saying, congratulations, you have 30 days to do this, repairs totaling over $1,000, that person may be somebody that's retired or on a fixed income, and that could be a real surprise and a real burden for them, when in reality those sidewalks are there for the community, not necessarily even for their use. So
I would just say, hearing what you're saying, I go back to my biggest concern is I don't want the city to be, to have, what am I trying to say here, for it to be a city,
the liability.
Yeah, the liability. But if we were to have, if you guys wanted to, you guys put maybe $5,000 or $10,000 out of the street fund or something, and say then that's available where we can help reimburse up to 50%, like some of these other cities.
Yeah, it looks
say.
like lots of cities are doing 50% cost sharing programs. That was really common based on what I saw.
That takes the liability off the city, which is what is my biggest worry. That's something. We've increased street repair budget to $500,000 this year. If we want to make it $495,000 and do that, we could.
Well, Mr. Mayor, didn't Mr. Lasher or Streets or somebody get a bid that was agreeable with these people? That it was a fixed price?
Yeah, so we,
I
in that
thought it was
letter that went
$150
out,
or $200 a slab.
it was less than 150. 150 was the max. And as of today, I just got an update from our code enforcement that 11 residents that received the letter said to go ahead and have the city do it for that price. So at this point, we've got 19 out of 25 that are asking for the city to replace those slabs. 6 of the residents from that letter that I sent out haven't responded, but said that they had reported they were going to use their own contractor, and 4 residents from any of the letters have not responded. So we've got 19 out of 25 that would like the city to go ahead and do it.
Wasn't that pretty good?
Yeah, I think.
Mr. Mayor, just one comment there. I'm glad that it sounds like we're getting people kind of aligned on the fact they have to do this, but I think we need to be careful not to confuse their compliance with our directive that they must do this with them being excited or happy about the way that we've implemented these policies. The government here has sent them a letter saying, you must do this, and so I'm not surprised that people are complying with that letter, but that in no way means that people are happy with
that. And told them that
that.
they would do that.
So, So it sounds like the issue, if I'm summarizing here, what's the right word I want to use, Dad? We want it to remain, and correct me if I'm wrong, we want it to remain the homeowner's responsibility, but we want to look and see if there's a way that we might be able to help them to a degree. Am I reading everyone's thoughts properly on that?
Well, I think what
Well,
Mr. Lasher did,
I wouldn't say that it'd be a cost to the city to get them to do it, but maybe you could spread the risk among the improvement district. I'm not really much of a fan of the city putting money up to fix those sidewalks. I think that the utility needs to be the homeowner's responsibility or the improvement district's responsibility to do it, if we wanted to go that route.
I'm not available for the homeowners to do that because they've already done it once in their specials. Now, what Mr. Lasher did with the letter and sent it out, as long as the city can get a contractor to give them a definite amount on per slab, I still feel that the property owner should fix the sidewalks, no matter who walks on them, my dog or your dog or Blow Joe, whatever.
I got a few comments and questions. Mr. City Manager, I guess I have a question. What percentage of all the sidewalks in Bel Aire were assessed for repair?
So it should have been all at one point when the streets went in. That should have been those properties should have been assessed.
Oh, I guess I misspoke. I guess I didn't mean assessed. The inspection enforcement of the city code.
Yes.
What percentage of the city's sidewalks were reviewed, and so those 29 letters, what percentage of the city was evaluated in their sidewalks? Was it 100% or was it something else?
No, it's probably 25% or less. So there's a lot of pieces that they have to enforce right now, or this summer they've been working on grass letters, so they go out to make sure that grass, and really I think what Jackie was mentioning from her the information we've received is most of our code enforcement is done off of complaints. So when you saw those numbers that was put together, so our code enforcement gets a complaint of a neighborhood that has, or they'll get a specific address. So they'll go out and check that address, and then to make sure that that area is treated fairly, then they would look at the ones in that area. But they are not out every day driving every street looking for sidewalks that need repair. So it's and the same thing with grass. When they get a complaint on grass, they'll go out and look at that, and then while they're there to and from or in that neighborhood, they'll look and see, make sure everybody else is mowing. So really, where the complaints came from, maybe 10%, 20% probably was all that was looked at.
Okay.
Don't they pick a section, like an area? Well, Bel Aire Heights comes to mind. They drive through Bel Aire Heights this time, and then the next 6 months or whatever, they drive another, like Pearson's.
It depends on what they're working on the time of year. So, for example, that's what happened last time in 2018. The fall time is when they went out, looked and found some, got some complaints, but the code enforcement officer left at that point.
Yeah.
And Keith is also our building inspector, and when we're doing 100 new houses a year, he's out basically, and that's why council a few years ago brought on code enforcement, because he wasn't even able to handle code enforcement because all of his time was spent on new construction. And so that's why the ball got dropped last year, is because that person left. He wasn't able to pick it up because he was doing inspections on new homes and new construction. So now we're back again at the fall looking at sidewalks again.
Who's responsible to pay for the repair of sidewalks that are in the city parks or other city land? Are parks treated differently?
So if it's on city property, it's the cities. And there's also major thoroughfares like Woodlawn. That's one that is, and that's why the Woodlawn expansion, we're putting those in. Those are cities.
When you say city property, do you mean city fully owned property, or does that include like public right-of-way easements?
No, that would be like a park. So if there's
park,
a
okay.
sidewalk in front of a park, we own that park.
So for example, at Eagle Lake Park, which is the closest park to my house, the homes that have their backyards backed up to the sidewalk that isn't, or goes around the lake, are they responsible for that repair, or is that considered the park sidewalk?
That's considered the city.
Okay.
And that's a unique situation there, because when that was developed as a city park, and so there's a tension with those homeowners because they back up against the lake and they like to believe that's their lake, but at the same time, they don't pay for any of the maintenance, the mowing, any of that kind of stuff.
Okay, so my understanding was there was a HOA around Eagle Lake. Do they not? Is the HOA not involved in the sidewalk repair
There
at all?
isn't one there now.
There isn't.
Oh, there isn't one?
They quit.
Okay. Okay. That wasn't clear to me, so I that's why I asked. Thank you. So, have there been any repairs to the city-owned land sidewalks since 2018? Or,
No,
okay.
not
So-
that I know of.
So were any of the sidewalks in the city-owned land, were they marked for repair?
I know about that because it is our responsibility.
Yeah.
So,
I think, part of what this problem is, in my view, is that this is the problem with government, right? We've got lots of laws, lots of ordinances, and we can't enforce all of them all the time equally. And we have limited resources as a city. They have to be spread for various reasons. And this is one of the issues is, like you mentioned code enforcement has been a challenge for the city. And there's a push for grass enforcement at the moment. And obviously we've had a sidewalk enforcement. And I guess the real crux of the issue for the citizens is it ends up being this you start shining the light on this area, and as a resident you get a letter from the city saying, hey, you got to repair this, and at the same time, like the park city-owned sidewalks haven't gone through the same level of scrutiny, and that gives a perception of kind of unfairness to the homeowners. And I think that's a real sensitive kind of issue. And I kind of feel like I went through a little bit of an educational process last couple of weeks going through this because I have a home that's on the corner with a sidewalk. And when I purchased my home, I never gave it a second thought. I never thought about the sidewalk repair. I didn't know it was my burden as a homeowner to do it. I didn't know I was responsible. It's never come up as an issue until 2 weeks ago when I got a phone call from a resident asking what the letter is about. Then when I got home, I got blue paint on my sidewalk where I have a known disrepaired spot, right? So initially I was pretty kind of put out. I kind of thought, sidewalk is public right away. Why the heck isn't it treated like a street? As I've kind of educated myself and read up on how these things go, I think I've kind of come around a little bit to kind of understanding. I guess I have a question for Councilman Hawes, and I'd like to follow up. How long have you been in real estate business?
My wife is a realtor.
Your wife is a realtor.
Yeah, she's been a realtor since 2007. She's had her license.
Okay. To your knowledge, do you have any examples where someone was about to purchase a home, but once they found out they had a sidewalk and they were responsible for the repair, they decided not to purchase it?
Oh, she runs into that all the time.
Really?
Yeah, with people. Well, they'll ask about the green belt that's behind. That's the same thing. Is it actual a green belt, or is it privately owned that could be sold and built upon at some point? But yeah, stuff like that. There's There's houses she's shown that have utilities in the backyard. The homeowner doesn't want the potential homeowner won't want that in their backyard because they don't want the Cox cable guy coming in every 30 days to hook up somebody's new cable and digging a new line through their yard.
Sure.
It does happen, absolutely, and that's one of the, like I said, that's one of the things that the realtor is required to tell them. Absolutely.
Well, thanks for sharing that, because that was something I was kind of just genuinely curious about. With the easement and having the sidewalk in front of your house, you're responsible to mow the grass, shovel the ice and snow, like you mentioned. There's the liability there. There's tree trimming. Tree trimming is something that's come up. Like we saw that grade 3 example of where the tree is coming up next to the sidewalk and uprooting it. I mean, I can imagine that's a lot more than $150 a slab to get that fixed. But that also is responsible to the homeowner because Bel Aire doesn't do tree trimming as a part of the city responsibility. So I kind of get all that. I'm kind of weighing all that in my mind about this. And alongside the sidewalks that are in the parks versus the homeowners, there's also the fact that we do need to enforce codes, but how those codes are enforced is also really important. Because if people get the perception that there's this kind of that they're, it's unsettling to get a city letter saying you got to do something and that you owe money to do something, basically. Especially when it's a large expense and there's such a limited time frame. I guess where I sit right now, I'm not in favor of necessarily changing the code to shift the burden of sidewalk repair from the homeowner to the city. I think there's a lot of complication. I think the precedent already exists where our laws seem to be set up with kind of the majority of the way a lot of places do it. I've spoken to a lot of people that are older than me about this issue. Every single person that I've talked to, with the exception of the Bel Aire residents that I've talked to, has said, of course homeowners are responsible for the sidewalk. That was just from people from varying parts of the country I've spoken about this. So, I don't know, I guess I feel like I've kind of increased my understanding of this issue. I think the idea of having like the welcome packet type thing that explains, do you have a sidewalk in front of your house? Now these are, we have a code that says you're responsible for the repair and liability. That's a good somewhat kind of proactive thing that frankly doesn't cost a lot of money. The issue of special assessment and benefit district creation or whatever, that sounds like local taxes increased for the local people in that area. I mean, if they want to vote for that, I guess. I don't know exactly how that comes about, but what we're talking about is or something that's public utility type. Falls into that category, in my view. And I think quite a bit more than that. Responsibility of sidewalks without talking about a tax increase. Revenue gap that's going to have to be met somehow, and the only change I really think that needs to be made was out saying, hey, this needs to be replaced. I think 6 months to a year, something that person, when they get a letter from the city basically saying there's a have really had a good idea about in the first in favor of adjusting, deadline is that right?
Correct, the discretion of the.
Do within the next 90 days.
Yeah.
I would be, I do budgets for,
Just throwing out a number, I wasn't.
But those contractors going to come for those.
So now, that doesn't mean everybody can get it done then. It may be.
Yeah.
Well, actually, we will pay for it, and so we won't bill them. Pay them, and then we would send. Just hearing what we're talking. Replacement of in the spring and the fall. Busy. Well, we want to do replacement. Fall, we could say if you're interested in being a part of that in the spring, we're going to do one in the spring and one in the fall. Would you like to have? And then that would give them more time if they want.
minimize the cost and use economy of scale to. I mean, if we can kind of work something there.
Within 30 days, so that we know that they're working. Get a contractor to do this.
I think we. Okay.
I think the city should pay for it.
I don't think the city should take on the burden of paying for it.
Okay. So
Facilitate it, but not pay for it.
right. So the majority is the city not pay for the sidewalks. And then part two here is that we need to still need to enforce codes, but we can be a little bit more lenient. Not lenient's maybe a bad word, but extend the time so it's not such a financial burden.
Right.
Correct?
Well, that plus, yes, I agree, because what we have right now is untenable in some situations.
Right.
Some people just can't comply that quickly.
Okay.
Right?
You'd be extending the notice period of the enforcement
That's
process.
what I'm getting from the governing body.
Well, I like what Mr. Lesher said about the fall and the spring.
Okay.
I mean, I think you have a
And
certain
then if
time
they can make-
to have your plan, and then that is going to be followed up on. I mean,
Then if they can make payments back to the city at a reasonable amount of time and a reasonable amount per month, we're not getting. So it helps. If you're a senior citizen, you only got.
Regulated how the city sidewalk repairs and limit our ability.
And I may tap Ted. Repairs may be borne by the city out of the fund for maintaining streets or out of the general fund or the general improvement. Use this to pay for that initial contract. For a year, how does that look? Concerns.
We usually, it comes out of capital improvement reserve. For 3 years, Keith always has done it. People have complied. I understand you guys had a lot of backlash this year, but most years it's really not. Keith just tells me what he needs, I give it to him, and we bill and people pay. So if we want to set up a special fund, we can, but because it's been like that since Michelle's been here, I just continued the process with Keith, and it's been kind of a non-issue. So I don't want to put anything on this, but that's kind of my experience on the financial side is we've always just billed and they paid and it was over.
If it works for you, it works for me.
Okay.
Does that answer your question as far as the general fund? I guess the capital
Well,
improvement fund is a subdivision
Yeah.
of the general fund, so
Yeah.
that would be a general fund mechanism for paying for it.
Okay.
Do we have other questions or discussion on the sidewalk code?
Are you looking for this?
Can we take a
No.
break?
So I just want to make sure everyone's clear so we can move on. Okay. Do you have a request that we take a 5-10 minute break? Is that okay?
Please.
So let's do that. It is 8:21, so let's resume at 8:30. We'll take up talking about signs, backflow, and travel policies and other.
Would you rather wait until it's a little bit of nothing?
Okay, well, unfortunately, that's.
I didn't know it would take this long.
Oh, I didn't. That so quickly from the bench because we talked about it for an hour before he had to answer questions. So, yeah, we should. Especially gather information. I would encourage you. My biggest.
I know there is one. It's different than kind of what we're doing. We can, it says we have to, so we shall. That's what I'm clear about. Okay.
It's I think it's
Okay, well, I just saw that and I wanted to ask you to make sure we're if we're supposed to be doing this by regulations, we're required to do it by regulations.
Certainly want to charge out our needs.
Right.
I'm glad we're having this conversation because usually the codes officer doesn't ever just, usually it's just Keith sending out some letters. I don't know why we do it, whoever does it just kind of goes the next day.
not wanting to let them.
So it's good that we're having this conversation, see who will, but
It's not
that's why it's come up as a first step. It's not very first step, but.
Since February, it's a bureaucrat. So who knows?
So they
since we haven't chartered out of it, that we're
Yeah.
fully compliant with.
Wait, no, maybe we shouldn't. It's changing way. You said you had your chance.
One of the biggest issues, one of my best friends, assistant city manager at Ashton, you saw him up there. I think it was Safe Routes to Schools. Ashton's an old community, so everyone their sidewalks is thrown under and broken up and everything. And they replaced one sidewalk in the city. Basically, oh, that's work. Oh, great. Yeah. Mine needs you too. Mine needs you too. Mine needs you too. So that's kind of what happens when you let all this stuff go for a long period of time. It's just like it is.
Our sidewalks are so much better off than our roads. I mean, we're all sitting so much better than the old city.
Which is
We don't
part
have
of
a
the
failed
concern of
downtown.
our homeowners is, hey, you guys are holding me to a higher standard than you're holding yourselves with the roads.
Look at our roads.
So you expect my sidewalk to be perfect, but when I'm walking out on your road, I can trip and fall way easier than I can on the sidewalk that you're making me pay to repair within 30 days.
I'm not. That was a different. I was really excited for my buddy to get this $1 million project, and I was about ready to type something like, that's awesome, and all I saw was literally hundreds of. How demoralizing to guys that work hard for.
Find out. Everybody comes out of the sports. I'm hearing from people all the time saying, hey, come check this out. It's actually generated more enforcement than 1-2 people.
Photo and be able to say, yeah, that's good. And frankly, to do that every 5 years, it costs $100. Every 5 years, plus you never had. Is that what the new one costs? Yeah. So it's the same way. I think all the people is like $75. So they have like 5 years.
Yeah, there's a new survey now.
That's what I say. I'm glad you're having this conversation. You might wonder what's that guy sitting there for reading the paper.
You're right.
No, I didn't. There you go. Not.
I may use that line.
So, yeah, we'll sorry. That's all right. So what are you living in? I would be like across the street from us. Oh, okay. Yeah. So you driving your golf? So I actually driving your golf cart? No, I got a GTV. I get to drive around on my own property, so I don't have to worry about that. So, yeah. I'll let you get back to it. I'll just listen for a little bit. Yeah. Till 9, about that.
I encourage you to come to the council meeting on Tuesday to speak.
All right.
She's going to research it further.
Ty, I do have a concern.
Yes.
Running dangerously low on golden Oreos.
You like the golden oil?
Oh my goodness, yes.
Oh, here's some over here.
Okay. No, I don't want them all.
Okay.
No. Well, like before the meeting, Jeff put his stuff. I'm like, the heck is that way? They turn the camera on. I think that's all your candy. I'm like, really, dude?
Somebody's been watching us, and they want to give you some. Oh no, that's Justin's phone.
Your wife's one, where are you?
He knows better than to answer that.
Okay, let's buzz on.
That's mine.
Your side.
Mine over here. Okay.
Thank you, Mayor, for the break. You don't have to scatter all over.
Okay, live 8:30, so I'm going to go ahead and get us back onto our agenda. We're still on item 1. Talk about letter C, which is signs. Realtor signs have been a topic in the past. Staff, I know, has been discussing options and has an idea to present. And in our packet is manager's report with that suggestion. So, interested in hearing more about that.
Mayor. So a few workshops ago, council had expressed some concern about all the realtor signs that show up on the corners and things like that. The other side of that is then they get taken down and such, and then we get calls about where my signs go. We've got new developments popping up or have been established around, and they want to be able to send people to their developments. So you've got Rock Spring, all the ones that you all have seen. So I've been trying to think of how can we, help our developers with send people to their developments and yet not have a cluttered corners and things like that. So done a little research, and in your packet, there's a kind of a sign that can go up. They call them wayfinder signs. But anyway, I thought it was pretty neat that it shows the top piece is city, and then you can then list your different developments underneath. With this specific sign, I've been talking with the company, and they actually, there's no charge to the city. They sell these basically advertisements to the developers.
Oh.
So if the developers are interested, then they purchase those spaces from them, and we just allow them in our right of way. So, and then there are some companies that actually sell the signs that realtors can go slide their signs in. So there's a couple different options. Like I said, this is a new option, and I thought even we could use a portion or two on certain roads where we might point to City Hall, to rec centers and things like that, as well as some development. So I just wanted to kind of report back and see if what council felt if we did something like this, kind of use it as advertising and wayfinder signs, and I figured maybe there's 10 or 12 different corners we could put them on if we went right down to 37. But if I pursued something like this, is there any concerns about doing this for the realtors in the city to kind of help guide people around? And
What's it cost?
Well, so this specific sign, there's no cost. They actually would work and sell the pieces to the developer. Some of the ones where we would buy, I'd have to research a little bit more on what those signs cost. I think from what I've heard, Park City does some like that. Now they're a larger sign that allow basically like a real estate sign to slide into. I think those are around $600 or something like that.
Have you reached out to developers to
I haven't
gauge
yet.
their interest? And I mean, they, I think, should know by now that we are not in favor of having just signs all over the right of way.
Right.
I definitely think that safety and impeding vision is a big concern. I would like to know their stance on it, their interest in it. I mean, I think it's a great idea. I think it looks a lot cleaner.
Absolutely.
I think it helps, direct people to where they might want to go. And I think, just for the overall aesthetic purposes, it's much nicer.
So then when they say this multiple sign thing up, the realtors would put like open houses in say, Richmond area?
No, this would be more for just, because you've seen them around Elk Creek. They've got them out on corners. So what you would do is they would purchase these, and we would have them on different corners, and it would say Elk Creek and an arrow pointing that direction.
Mm-hmm.
Deer Run, we do some like that. And so, but like I said, I didn't want to pursue this in case you were thinking that you didn't want any signs, in is, but if you, like I said, because I hear from the developers that, well, how are we going to market our area? You know, people need to know where we're at. And if you don't want signs out there, then how do we get people? And so we're trying to walk that tightrope. And so I thought this might be a great, I thought it looked nice and it might be a win-win if you guys were comfortable.
Well, and I think we want people in the city as well. So
I like that
I think
second.
it's a good idea. I do wonder how we might address those signs of the realtor grants open house. I mean, a lot of them, like they put a sign out in the right of way and it's there for 2 weeks. It's not an open house, it's just for sale sign basically.
Right.
I guess you're just picking those up now. Is that, would we continue that mostly with those signs?
Yeah, so that's would, and this is more for the developers who were having it.
Yeah.
You know, the ones that go up with somebody has a house on, 45th Street or whatever. Those we would treat individually because those are individual homes. These are, what I'm talking about is when the developers put
The ones that are up for week after week after week
yeah,
after week
because they've
after
got,
week.
some specs and models in there, and they want people to come to their development.
yeah, Central Park,
Yeah.
Iron Gate.
Because we want them to keep developing, because they're
absolutely.
buying land and stuff, so.
But the ones that just say open house this weekend, they put up Wednesday night and they take down Sunday afternoon, those still go up. You're talking about the ones that are up
Yeah.
almost year round. Yeah.
Because, I think about Elk Creek, they put them up and just leave them up until we take them down. And then they have to come pick them up. And then we hear, well, how are we getting people don't know where Elk Creek's at.
Which is a legitimate question, yeah.
Yeah, so that's why I was thinking, well, how can we help them out and keep our corners looking nice? And then, like I said, I would even like to, if the city has to buy a space on here, but point people where City Hall's at, and a rec center, and things like that. I think it would be kind
I
of
like
neat.
that idea.
Hold on, I'm confused. I need clarification. This report says realtor signs. It's talking about realtor signs, and then you just said it's developer signs.
So the way it works is that, developers are the ones that are actually developing, but they hire realtors to sell their properties. So Elk Creek, they've got a realtor that they work with but they put up the Elk Creek signs. So what I'm talking about is the realtors that are hired by the developers to sell their development.
Okay, I don't know. I guess I kind of get it. I get the concept, but if you think putting these signs up that are going to be big and obnoxious and colorful at 12 intersections, you're going to still have realtors sticking their little dopey signs at the intersection. Like, that's not going to stop, right? That's never going to stop.
Well, for the most, I mean,
So I don't know. Even this past summer, a few houses went up for sale in my neighborhood and were sold. And realtors stuck one of those big metal framed, like 2-spike thing that is like 2 feet off the ground, and it's a metallic sign. It's like heavy. And I went out to mow my grass, and my wife kind of complained, like, "Oh, one of those signs is in our corner again." But me personally, like, I didn't care. I was like, "Well, they're trying to sell that house." I'm like, and I have to physically take that sign, pull it out, plop it on the ground, mow around it. It's an inconvenience, but to me, it wasn't that big of a deal, and I was happy to see that, hey, that house sold pretty quick, and we got new neighbors, and that's pretty cool. But if the issue is, hey, we got all these signs in the right of way, no, that's not going to stop. Like, I don't see this solving that. They're still going to, you can't get every single intersection to have this sign, and when they need to realtors need to direct people to the actual street, because I can't even find my way halfway through this city anyway, right? but it's not going to stop. Like, it's just going to add more signs, and it's not going to eliminate the complaints about these small signs going up. That's not going to stop. Like, I don't see this fixing.
For me, though, this is as much as advertisement for the entire development and directing traffic to an actual development.
That's not what this started out as.
I understand it says realtor sign. I understand that, but I think this is an excellent way to help people that are wanting to develop, an actual housing development here, and having them have some advertisement and direction. Because let's say Iron Gate has 150 lots. I mean, you're talking about, 2, 3, 4 years of selling. If we can continually direct people to that development, same with, once Elk Creek is done selling, all their lots, they're going to be like, oh, we're out, and that sign gets replaced by another development, hopefully. And I think that's, I mean, for the most part, realtor signs shouldn't be in right-of-ways. I mean, they should be, with all the GPS and everything that people have now, they should be in front of the house, and then if there's an open house, maybe on a corner directing somebody for that day, it should be up. If people have, for sale signs on the corner and saying, 10 blocks down that way, that shouldn't be allowed. I mean, that's one that should get pulled and should be.
But my point is, we already have ordinance against that, right?
Yes.
So, I mean, that's.
Well, and the example photos here are for like whole developments, right? It's this development, that development. They're not the individual "my house is for sale" signs. So yeah, this won't solve the individual "my house is for sale" sign, but it'll just be better. It'll be better advertisement for the developers that are trying to sell the 200 homes, which will reduce those signs if each of those developers has a sign out for their development at each corner. Those will go away, but it won't. To your point, it won't actually impact the individual "my one house is for sale" sign.
And aren't they going to be traded one for one? We're just moving the same. A sign is still going to be there. It's going to be at a slightly different location. And I mean, this big convoluted thing, this totem pole of 500 colors, that no one's going to want to see that. I get confused myself just driving through and see 100 signs for Central Park, and I'm like, why doesn't it just say Bel Aire? Why doesn't it say Central Park?
I don't know. I mean, I think they look nice. I think it'd be nice to give the developers that option to help advertise. I want to do anything I can to help them sell their houses and sell their land and bring that growth to Bel Aire. And if they think this will help them, and especially if they're willing to pay, their portion of the sign, I think it's a good idea. Kind of along the same lines as the golf carts.
Well, I like the idea of the city having one too that says, rec center this way, city, because I have heard from more than one person, that says I couldn't find the rec center, I couldn't find city hall.
Well, it's confusing. I mean, because we've got all these streets that go crazy directions. It's confusing.
Okay, so we've heard kind of one yay, one nay. Let's hear from the rest of you.
I'm for this.
I like these. I think this is a good idea for developers. The only question I got, Ty, is when would you take it down? At what point, how full is the development when we say, hey, we don't really need that sign anymore for that development?
Yeah, and that would be a question, and like I said, since the consensus is to kind of move forward with this, I'll start working with the company, and then we'll work with the developers to figure out, because I think the mayor said, at some point they're going to say, well, we don't want that, we don't want to pay for that anymore, so then we would have to take it down or replace it or something like that. So I'll get some more information kind of moving forward.
I think at least we need more information on it, and there may be things about it that we find that we don't like, or they may say, well, the sign has to stay there even if one thing is sold. Well, that may not be attractive to have only one banner on there and the rest of it be empty.
Well, pull it out and put something else in.
Right. We would need to be able to have some of those options. So.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'll just kind of pursue that.
Yeah, that's nice.
All right, let's talk about backflow. Councilmember Benaj had asked that be included on the agenda, and he sent several questions. Staff researched those, and that information is in the packet. You want to point out we have a guest in the audience who's been waiting very patiently to hear this very discussion. I was able to talk with him during the break, so I appreciate you being here. And one of the questions that he was asking is one of the ones that Councilmember Benaj has also asked and was answered. So, Ann, I'm going to let you talk us kind of through this a little bit.
Actually, I'm going to shift the floor to Jackie
And never
because
mind.
she's done. she kind of spearheaded this, and then I will jump in as needed.
Okay, so, Mayor, as you said, Mr. Benaj asked to follow up on that discussion on backflows. He wanted some more information on the regulatory requirements causing our code to be the way that it is. With the short timeline, he said he was okay with some kind of high-level general information. We were able to find that a lot of the basis of the statute, I guess the umbrella, is the Clean Water Act, which requires very generally that cities keep water, municipalities keep their water clean and accessible. Is there another way that you would describe that?
This Clean Water Act and the Safe Drinking Water Act, which are similar but a little bit different, they both require that the cities, as Jackie said, keep their water safe to a certain standard. There have been instances throughout the years where backflow or contaminated water has gone from an area, whether it is sprinkler systems that come into contact with groundwater and come into contact with dirt and soil and all the stuff that lives in soil, to stuff from other different types of, I'm kind of blanking out the words here, other different types of systems like brine tanks, medical facilities, fire sprinkler systems, commercial facility processes, et cetera, that get sucked back into the city system. There was one situation in particular that really stood out in my mind and researching this. Somebody was drawing a bath for their child, and there's little worms swimming in the bath water because the water had gotten sucked back into the system from a broken sprinkler line that people didn't know about. So the backflow prevention device, it allows the water to go one way only. It allows the water to go from the city system out to the customer, to the sprinkler system, to the end use, and prevents it from coming back through. Right. So the EPA has identified this as a fairly high-risk situation, which is why they have pushed on KDH&E and the states to regulate these. They don't, from our limited time available to research, we couldn't find specific regulations from EPA, but they have the overarching one that says you, as a water supplier, are required to provide safe water for your consumers.
So I think that summarizes the federal kind of overarching scope very clearly. And then next we get into the state statute that requires public water supply systems to at least have a minimal level of backflow protection. And that's a low hazard valve, which is a specific type of valve that is not testable, but it does prevent backflow, and it's less than what Bel Aire requires. So the state has a minimum standard. We're not at that minimum standard. We're above that minimum standard. And every public water supply system has to have at least the minimum. And then from there, KDH&E sets another general kind of requirement. And we did add one of their statutes in here, but I feel like they're volumes, one of their regulations, but there are volumes of regulations on this, which just again requires that you have to have some sort of program. So between the federal government, KDH&E, we have to have a program, and it has to have at least a low hazard preventer installed. Bel Aire layers on there that it has to be testable preventer, and the difference between the low hazard and the testable one is the low hazard one isn't testable. The one that Bel Aire requires is testable. So we can go in and see if it's working properly with a simple gauge. And that's why, and many other cities require this medium level standard. So those are the laws in play. I guess next we looked at the system itself, whether the system that we have allows it to either be repaired or replaced. Again, you could go to a minimum standard. That can only be replaced, and it's not testable. Because the system can be repaired and does have several parts that come together. Maybe we can.
Asleep.
Is there slides of that, Chloe? Maybe not. Okay, no, there's a picture. There's a picture included in your report. So this would be the backflow preventer, this part in between. And because it has so many intricate parts, it can be taken apart, and the inspectors and certified folks who are certified to install the system have to be able to pass a certification class, which is a 4-day class. Roughly costs $225, and it's done by a state agency. So that's the barrier between a homeowner being able to test or replace his or her own backflow preventer system. That's also the protection to ensure that the intricate pieces are replaced correctly, that people know what to look for, and they have to also be able to operate the gauge that goes along with it. So that's the certification requirement. The certification requirement is a part of the city's code. It's not coming from anywhere else. So,
And I would like to add to that, any changes that the city would like to make to their backflow prevention program has to get approved by the state. So the state can say that, no, we're not going to accept that, that we do not consider that as acceptable for protecting the water supply. So as you're thinking about this, that's one thing to keep in mind. I did reach out to our state representative, Sabrina Cantrell with KDH&E, and she did recommend not making changes to our current program, but you can certainly suggest some, and would be happy to present them to her and get the state's thoughts.
So the state requires us not only to have a program, but to have an approved program by statute?
That's one of the things that they look at when they come in and do their system audit, is that there is a program, and it has, I did see a regulation in there somewhere that it needed to be approved through the state.
yeah, and that
I didn't catch that the first time.
Right.
I may have not
Right.
seen that in this statute, but there's a marriage of KDH&E regulations that obviously snuck that
Just
in.
an interesting nuance.
Yeah, and you can find almost anything you want to look at on the internet.
My question is, how does the public know that they've got to do this? Because the phone calls I got were mainly from senior citizens, and they have their backflow sprinkler system checked, but they didn't know that it was their responsibility to bring that certification to City Hall and have it recorded. And the other thing was, one lady told me she didn't even know if the guy certified it because he didn't give her anything. So she had to have her daughter call to get a certification for it. Well, there again, she didn't know that we had special contractors that only City of Bel Aire accepted, is what she was told when she called City Hall.
And there's been a lot of learning around this whole issue as far as how people know about it. It's the same with the sidewalk issue. It's education that needs to occur on city staff to residents, and it's also residents taking the responsibility to understand some of the regulations. In my previous house, we had a backflow preventer, and I had no clue that it needed to be certified or looked at every year. And so we never had it done. It's until you get caught up in the checks.
Well, this other lady that's single, she called me. She had just had a sprinkler system put in. She gets the backflow system checked every year, but I think he checks it when she shuts it off. But then he's not certified in Bel Aire. She didn't know that.
And as long as contractors have taken that certification course, then they just have to contact the city, and we can get their number and get them certified and renewed and added to the list. So
Well,
that's
what if he's already certified? Does he
part
have
of
to
it's an
take it again?
education program. No, if they're certified through the different certification programs out there, then they don't have to get recertified. We just need to know about it, and we need to get their certificate.
I recommend that there be another sheet added to that
Welcome back.
welcome pack that
Well, I want to say thank
how
you
this works.
to Ann and Jackie for doing this research, and I know you didn't have a lot of time to do it, but I really appreciate it. I had about an hour after I got into the hotel today to do a little bit of research of my own, and I found something that I thought was interesting, and I don't know if we want to consider doing this, but League City, Texas, League City, Texas, has a pretty interesting website on backflow preventers, and they have the requirement for backflow preventers on their website. The curious thing about it's very educational. It's got all the information in there that you probably want to know about backflow preventers as well, if you want to take the time to read it all. But the interesting thing and curious thing about it is they do require the annual test. They do not require the rebuild unless a backflow preventer fails. So I thought that was curious. That was an interesting way that they do it. And I don't know if that's something we can consider, only requiring the rebuild when it fails. I did a little testing or checks on a couple of manufacturers about their warranty. One of them was Watts. They only give a 1-year warranty on their backflow preventers. Apollo has a 5-year warranty on theirs. So the warranty issue is probably not really a factor in how frequent one needs to be rebuilt, because they're apparently all over the place. And I didn't get to check for manufacturers, so I don't know what their condition is. But anyway, I'd be happy to send you all that information, and maybe I'll set it to time and let him send it out to you so you could look at those websites if anybody wanted to do that. But it was just kind of interesting that they don't require those rebuilds. I don't know if we can do that, if we want to entertain doing that. It was pretty obvious to me from what you're saying and what I've seen on the internet about the tech, about the certification and that kind of stuff, that's probably not something that any homeowner is going to want to do, because it's pretty expensive for them. It probably costs them close to $1,000 by the time they buy the equipment and pay for the course. And then it's time off work if they're working weekends also. So I didn't see any reasonable way that they could be self-certifying that made any sense. So I kind of understand that now. But thank you for the research. Anyway, I don't know if there's any interest in pursuing any more of that information, but there it is.
I think last time we talked about this, we talked about changing the date in our ordinance, and I assume that'll come to us at a future council meeting to review. The other interesting thing that I remember was a lot of concern from folks who no longer use their sprinkler system. And, you know, they had somebody come and winterize it and turn it off, and they've never turned it back on, and some concerns around that. Can you just remind us what the current policy is on how that should be appropriately dealt with?
If a system is no longer in use, it needs to be disconnected from the homeowner's water system. Because once it is disconnected and the city inspector, Keith, goes out and verifies it, they do not need to keep up the annual maintenance on their backflow preventer. If it is not disconnected from the system and they don't use it, they still need to keep that annual maintenance up on the backflow preventer. Because if we have a main break or a fire and we have to open the fire hydrant, there's a loss of pressure in that line and water will get sucked back into the city's main. So if the sprinkler system is still connected, the backflow preventer hasn't been tested and isn't working, then we run the risk of worms, nematodes, whatever, getting into the city's
So they might not be using it, but it might still be pressurized because it hasn't been disconnected. And when you say disconnected, is that turned off at the water main with that valve that they have to, shove the long stick down there to turn it off, or
it's
like cut the pipe?
Physically separated.
Okay.
So it's physically.
What happens
yes.
if they have 2 meters, one for the sprinkler and one for their house water?
There's still a backflow preventer on that separate meter, and the meter could be pulled out because and then capped off. There would be a possibility of putting in just a straight piece of pipe between the two where the meter would go. We take reasonable precautions. We're not going to catch everything like we've been talking about all night. There's ways to get around every regulation, but we take reasonable precautions.
Okay,
And
so, because there are homes in Bel Air that have 2 meters, one
Correct.
for the sprinkler and one for their house use.
Yes.
So the ones that have 2 meters in their sprinkler system, you're saying maintenance just goes and takes that meter out and then it's shut off?
That is possible. They have to be disconnected from the system.
Okay.
So there cannot be any physical connection from their sprinkler system, regardless of whether it's 1 meter or 2. If they're not using it, it has to be physically disconnected. So a plumber would have to come in and reconnect that system and test
They
it.
have to buy
I
another
will
meter,
say
wouldn't
that
they?
this connection needs to have a little distance to it, like a couple inches or something, so that somebody can't just put a splice back in there and connect it back up. But they could always do that, I guess, if they want to really play games.
Yes. And we do have a sticker that we've made, so those systems that are disconnected, there's a sticker that wraps around the pipe that says this system has been disconnected from the water. You need to contact City Hall at this number to get a permit to reconnect. So it is noted, so anybody wanting to reconnect those sprinkler systems is warned. We obviously can't have cameras in every house to make sure that it doesn't happen, but, we do our best.
All right, well, thank you for that. Any other questions on backflow?
Nope.
Okay. Then move on to policies. I know staff's been working on a number of policies, on updating a number of them. And one that's ready for council input and approval is the travel policy. It's in our packets. Ted, thank you for sticking around. And
Yeah, sleep's overrated this time of in my life, but really I'm carrying the water tonight for our city treasurer, Deb Apple. She deals a lot with the travel policy, and after reviewing it, we haven't really touched it in a long time. I'll give you the short of it. I know you guys all read it, but the approval process has always been the same. Ty approves all travel. It's the after-the-fact stuff that we're trying to clean up with these changes is let's go ahead and include the finance office on the upfront side of the approval process so that when an employee comes back from a conference, they don't have 3 receipts and 3 missing receipts and then just have stuff. We paid sales tax on the hotel. We just eliminate all that by saying include the finance office at day one. We'll set the arrangements. We'll do everything for you. We'll provide per diem. And then you go to your conference. You don't have to take your money out of your pocket to spend money on dinners or anything like that. And they come back a happier employee that's well trained and educated on everything. So that's the skinny of it is you're including the finance office up front instead of at the end when we're trying to put Humpty Dumpty back together.
And that saves you a lot of time not needing to chase receipts.
A lot of time. The per diem process, IRS kind of has it down to a science, very easy. If anybody has read this, we always have practiced this, but now it's actually in our policies. You need to provide a brochure or what the conference you're going to is, so we can say, hey, on Tuesday they're providing lunch, so we don't pay for the rate that they set for that zip code. That's how per diem works. You go to IRS or actually it's a different website, but send to the IRS. Put in Kansas City address, zip code. They give you a table. It says for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. Here's your amounts. We pay it. It's over. So a lot of this stuff is reorganizing the policy and clearly defining what we expect from you. The big one, not big one, but I think Deb did a great job in talking about partial day travel. If I leave at 8, the same time as I come to work at 7:30, but 8, I don't expect the city to provide lunch or breakfast for me when I come here at 8, so we're not going to pay you per diem for if you leave after 7 o'clock in the morning. So, sorry, Deb, or sorry, Betty. So that's kind of what page 3 here is for. I thought it was pretty funny. We had MapQuest in our old, very antiquated. It's still around, but we changed it to Google Maps or a like application. So we continue on with this policy. We use city vehicles anytime we can. If there's nothing available, we'll pay the per diem rate for the personal travel. but that's clearly defined in there. Some people prefer to use their own vehicle. There's a separate rate for even that if you prefer to use your vehicle over an existing vehicle we have. It's a little, that's probably the thing we added that wasn't in there before. Everything else is pretty much standard. If there's any questions, I'll be lucky to.
It all looked good to me.
Okay.
Just accept it.
Thank Deb. She's really good.
Questions?
Per diem's the way to go for that.
Yeah.
It's
I have traveled for my work where I have to turn in receipts, and every about 6 or 7 months I literally eat a meal because I forgot to get a receipt, and I can't get reimbursed. So I like the idea of a per diem. If you go over, and that's what you get.
It's a lot easier.
It makes it a lot easier.
and you can plan better.
Yeah.
And cheapskates love it.
Yeah.
It is amazing how less I eat when I get a per diem versus when I turn in receipts. All right. Well, we're going to move on to other. The only thing I wanted to bring up was at our last council meeting we had talked about a zone change map, but I know at the land bank meeting we talked quite a bit about it, and Ty sent out an email explaining that, so just wanted to make sure everybody understood all that. It was okay?
Yep.
Any questions on
Yeah,
that?
so I think what I understood from that is changing the zone will have an impact on the tax rate for that establishment based on how they're going to use it, and it may be being a different use than what we had originally understood it to be.
Just before we move forward, because I know we tabled that at our last meeting and we didn't want to hold that up any longer. So no questions?
Nope.
All right, anything else anybody else wants to bring up?
I move to adjourn.
We're not even that formal tonight. Just get out of here. We're dismissed.
Whatever.
All right. Thank you for working through all the.
Thank you, Betty.
You're welcome.
I appreciate it.
There's the welcome